Hello, I'm Jack Warner, and today I am going over how to create a budget. And this is the last lesson, a part of my budgeting series, all a part of the main Winning with Money course. So, creating a budget, we've talked about financial behavior, we've talked about savings tips and consumer skills and budgeting strategies. So, today we're actually going to get into how to actually construct a budget. The first step we need to know before we decide to jump into our budget is we have to calculate monthly income after taxes. And I'm going to go over more about after taxes here in a second, but we need to know our income. And that's any income. That could be primarily, whatever you earn at your primary job. That could be a side hustle that you're currently working. It can be a gift that your parents or grandparents give you. It can be interest earned on some kind of investment that you've made. Maybe perhaps you have rental income, whatever. Any kind of money that you are earning, we're going to be focusing on that monthly income because that's important for your monthly budget. So for salaried employees, this is simple. Divide your annual after-tax take-home pay by 12. So say you're salaried at $4,000 a month. That means you're going to be making $48,000 a year. Sometimes you'll be able to know your monthly. If that's it, then you can skip this step. If not, if you just know what you make annually, so if you make $60,000 annually, then you just take that number and you divide it by 12. And again, I'm sorry, we're going to talk about after tax here in a little bit. So everything I'm saying right now is before taxes have been taken out. So we're looking at what's called gross pay, gross income. But right now you have your monthly average. If you are not salaried and you are an hourly wage worker, then you kind of have to estimate a little bit. But if you historically have been working the same hours at the same company at the same wage, then usually you can get a pretty close and accurate estimate for your monthly income by using this formula. You take your hourly wage, so say you're getting paid $20 an hour, times it by your average work hours per week, so let's just say 40 hours per week. Then you multiply that number by 52, and we get your average or your total annual gross income. So in order to break it down monthly, we need to divide it by 12, and we'll have our close estimate of our monthly income. And for some of us, we are self-employed contractors, business owners, or whatever other situation you might be in. Maybe you're independent and you're in and out of jobs, or you're freelancing, whatever. You're in what's known as a variable income occupation because it can change. You can have extremely good highs, and you have some months where you're not making any money, and I've had both. So use the average of the highest earning months and lowest earning months. So for example, that I've written out in my notes, just for example, a self-employed house cleaner. In the summer months, they make $5,000. They make $5,000 each month. Each month. In the low season, say in the winter, they only make $2,000 per month. So they're going to take their highest and then their lowest and then average it out. And in this case, I had to do the math to make it easy for me. So it's only going to be 3,500. I say only, that's still a good average. So they'll have $3,500, and that's what they'll use as their monthly budget because they have their highs and lows and evens out over the year. There are other ways to do this. This is just a simplified version of what I suggest that people should do. So gross pay is what I was talking about before. We have not gone over this yet, but gross pay, everything I've discussed before this was gross pay, is before deductions and taxes have been taken out from your income. Net pay is after deductions and taxes, and that's what we need to focus on because you don't get this money. The government gets that money, deduct any of the deductions or taxes. Well, some of the deductions go to you, depending on your whatever your setup is with your employer. But the taxes go to the government. But we need to be focusing on the net pay because that's the money, that's what's considered take-home pay. So we're focusing on that. And some things that might affect your net pay will be federal taxes. I say might, will for sure affect your take-home pay, your federal taxes, your state taxes, Social Security, Medicare taxes. And then the rest of these are kind of up to your choice depending on your circumstance. Healthcare contributions, your 401k or whatever retirement plan you have set up, and then any other miscellaneous benefits or other expenses that are a part that docks your gross pay and affects your net pay. Step 2. Now we know our income. Now we can focus on identifying and categorizing expense types. And there's two major types of expenses. The first one's variable expenses. And variable just means it changes. That's all it means, is changing expenses. Expenses that change over the month. And these are a little bit harder to predict. Certain factors might change. Some of them might not even exist some months, and some of them might exist other months. So variable expenses are a little bit more difficult to budget for. Fixed expenses are much easier because the cost remains the same no matter what, usually, or within a predictable numerical value. So now that we are starting to, we would list all of our expenses, we know what fixed and variable expenses are. Now we need to list all of our expenses. So we start making a list, and you can just list it down on a notepad or Excel sheet, wherever you need. Once you've come up with that list and you've exhausted everything you spend money on, then start categorizing them. Is this fixed cost or is this variable expense? So some fixed cost here, you can see some of the examples, and you read through those real quick, and variable expenses. And again, some might argue like transportation might change, or depending on rent or whatever, insurance, all that can change, but usually those things are pretty fixed. You know, you can predict those months in advance. And I put an asterisk on groceries because groceries should, in most cases, groceries should, if you're doing a good job with your budget, they should fall into the fixed category. But because of inflation and other economic factors that are out of our control, they can sometimes be in variable categories, in the variable expenses category. So the first thing we do once we've done that, calculate fixed costs first because it's much easier. Go ahead and get the ball rolling. Set it aside. Usually fixed costs are mandatory costs, things we need like food, shelter, utilities. Utilities can be variable too. But those are things we usually need, so and they're easier to get done. The next thing is to calculate as close as we can our variable costs, even if it's just an estimate. The best way to do this is if you've been living somewhere a while and you've had a good routine, you've had a solid routine for several months or even just a few weeks, you can use historical bank statements or receipts to kind of help determine what is going to be a variable expense or what can I predict. So say summer's currently coming, or we're currently in summer really, and I know my power bill is going to go up. So usually I can kind of predict what that's going to be. It's going to be a lot different than it was in March when I wasn't running heat or air conditioning. But now it's June, or getting close to June. It's May 31st today. So now that it's getting closer to June, it's going to be really warm. My power bill is most likely going to double. So I need to be aware of that. And that's something I can predict. Now we can input our expenses in our monthly budget. And there are all types of free budget tools. You can do low maintenance basic templates. You can pen and paper, or you can do highly detailed, high tech budget apps or online tools. Some of my favorite budget apps, I've used these before, so I know them well. And you can connect your bank account to them too. And this is what I like because they can do a lot of the groundwork for you. Some people don't like that because it's security issues, and I understand. I've even used just an Excel sheet before, and that's fine too. In fact, I recommend starting out, if you've never budgeted before, I recommend starting out physically or manually inputting your data rather than using the automated apps like this. But Mint is made by Intuit, which makes TurboTax. Every dollar is from the Ramsey Solutions team and NerdWallet. And they also post a bunch of other helpful financial content on their website. But they're very nice to use because usually you can just one and done. You look at it once a month, you change a few things, a few categories, and then it does the work for you. And it'll even send you notifications when you've overspent. If apps aren't your thing, you can go old school, just like I was mentioning earlier. You can go old school. You can use Google Sheets or free budget templates to work from. Excel programs. There's all types of things. You can just Google it too and come up with all types of free templates that you can use. And again, I recommend starting out with that. Step 3. Again, I've mentioned this in a few of my videos. Make sure you are setting goals with your budget. You're not just budgeting because you're a nerd and you start getting away with it, and that can be fun. That's okay. But you need to use the budget for a purpose. Set goals. So some goals you might have is build savings to buy a house, pay off any debt that you might have, travel. Maybe you've done all this and you're just wanting to take a huge vacation or whatever it might be. Invest in a business. Oh, I mentioned those out of order. I'm sorry. Invest in a business or travel. Buy a car. This helps, and this helps us stay out of debt because we can build up cash to buy that car. Or just as simple as build an emergency fund. And this is one of our first steps in becoming financially free, is building emergency fund. It's right after making a budget. So that's perfect. Step 4, so while you're budgeting, you will already be doing this, so it's only natural that you're tracking your spending. Keep receipts. Make sure to check your spending with your budget. So as you're inputting your data into your budget, you have your receipts, you're double checking to make sure there's no discrepancies, or you're not overspending in some areas, or you're not double recording certain items and transactions. And it just helps you keep organized too. Keep your receipts. Popular methods to help you track spending. Some people recommend only using your debit card because then you can see it all online, and then you can download that data from your bank statement. Some people say check your receipts with your budget, which is what I just said. Check your receipts constantly with your budget, or once a week. Some people like to bring a notepad or the old checkbook. They'll bring a notepad or the checkbook, and they'll write down their expenses as they spend the money. And automated apps. Like I mentioned earlier, with those apps, and there's dozens of other budget apps out there that will do all the tracking for you and categorizing. Step 5, last step, review the budget process. So once you've picked what kind of budgeting you want to do, your budget strategy, you're tracking your expenses, and you've done all that, say you've done it for 2 months. Now you need to review the budget process, make sure it's working properly, make sure you're sticking to your budget. Review your budget by analyzing categories that you can cut spending on. Like, wow, I didn't know I was spending $400 dining out. That's something I can cut in half right now. You might need to adjust. You might need to review your budget because you need to adjust it because of lifestyle changes. Maybe you made a big move or a big job change. Maybe you have a lot more income now. Maybe you're not making any income. So you need to make sure you're adjusting your budget and looking at it at least once a month, if not once a week, to make any changes that might need. And of course, we're humans, so we make mathematical or clerical errors. So make sure we are reviewing for that too. And then set a healthy budget habit. Set a routine, put budgeting on the calendar. Say, I'm going to be doing it the first of the month, every month. That's when rent's due, or that's when my mortgage is due, so I'm already doing something financially anyway. Go ahead and set that date on the calendar and do it once a month. If you're just starting out, I would recommend doing it once a week. Don't be a slave to your budget though. I was guilty of this for a very long time. I would check it almost every day. Nothing changed. I just had to look at it. You don't need to be a slave to it. Stick to it. Give yourself some grace too. If you happen to go over it a little bit one month, that's okay, as long as it's not several $100s. If it's like, oh, I spent $20 extra on groceries, that's okay. And get the family involved. For individuals, get somebody else involved. Get a mentor. But if you have a family, I would highly recommend getting your family involved, especially if you're married. Get your spouse involved. They need to be a part of this process to help keep each other accountable. So reviewing the budgeting steps. Step 1, calculate monthly income after taxes. Step 2, identify and categorize expense types. Step 3, set goals. Step 4, track your spending. And then step 5, review the budget process to make sure all this is working. All these other steps are working and you're working towards your financial future. So that is how you create a budget. Again, each person's different, so there isn't one way to do it, because everybody's going to be a different learner. They're going to go through this process in a different way, and everybody has different financial situations too, which makes it so unique. It makes this topic so unique, and it's one of the reasons why I like talking about it. This is the end of my budgeting series. The next series, I'm going to be focusing on how to build up our savings. So everything I talk about from now on will be connected to budgeting, but I'll be talking about building up savings, utilizing banks to help us reach our savings goals, and how budgeting can assist with that.